Good morning. I'm coming to you this morning, bringing you a good word on YouTube from 2nd Chronicles chapter 24, verses 17 through 20. In our last post, we learned that King Joash had been the king who desired to restore the worship and the building of the temple. And he set the chest of Joash and brought in the funds that should have been brought in by the priests all along. In the last post, we had a willing king and reluctant priests. But then the scripture tells us in 2nd Chronicles chapter 24, beginning in verse 17, it says, after the death of Jehoiada, he was the chief priest under Joash, he says, the officials of Judah came and bowed down to the king, and the king listened to them. And they abandoned the house of the Lord their God of their fathers, and they served the Asherim and the idols. So wrath came upon Judah and Jerusalem for their guilt. And then in verse 20 it says that the Spirit of God came upon Zechariah, the son of Jehoiada, the priest. And he, Zechariah, he stood above the people and said to them, thus God has said, why do you transgress the commandments of the Lord and do not prosper? Because you have forsaken the Lord, he also has forsaken you. Under the leadership of the chief priest Jehoiada, the Levites who were to carry out the work of the temple had been negligent in gathering together that annual temple tax for the upkeep of the temple. King Joash, you remember, forced their hand and required their obedience. Years later, however, Jehoiada the priest had died, and King Joash had softened, and he began to allow the worship of pagan gods in Israel and the abandonment of the temple. The abandonment of the temple was what he had preached against in his early years, and now he was part of it. Jehoiada's son Zechariah was now chief priest, and it was Zechariah who began to call the people back to obedience. Rather than rise up and thank him, the people, the scripture says, conspired against him. In fact, at the command of Joash the king, they stoned Zechariah to death in the courtyard of the temple. I don't want you to ever believe that faithfulness to the Lord will bring you the respect of the people. Here, Zechariah was the one man standing faithful, and he died right in the place that he made his stand. To make the story worse, it was Zechariah's father, Jehoiada, who had saved Joash's life and restored him and the line of David to the throne. King Joash failed to remember the grace that was displayed to him by Jehoiada, and he failed to remember where his own heart had been in the restoration of the temple. And so in one Bible chapter, 2nd Chronicles chapter 24, the story goes from a willing king and a reluctant group of priests to a faithless king and a willing priest. What's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is, today is a new day. Yesterday's faithfulness means nothing. Are you faithful today? In His grace, I'm Randy White. God bless you today and every day. Be faithful to Him.